आज हमारे नौसेना के 21 जहाज वहाँ डिप्लॉय हुए हैं और उनका काम है कि वहाँ शांति रखना, कि वो पहरेदारी करते हैं ताकि जो मर्चेंट शिपिंग पे अटैक ना हो। पर हमारा ये भी कूटनीतिक क्षेत्र में ये प्रयास है कि हम जब ये तनाव थोड़ा बड़ा था, एक दूसरे पे अटैक भी हुआ था, तो मेरी खुद मोदी जी के कहने पे मैंने दोनों वहाँ देशों के विदेश मंत्री को फ़ोन भी किया और मैंने उनको ये भी मैसेज दिया कि पूरी दुनिया चाहती है कि आप लोग इसको आगे नहीं, आप इसको नहीं बढ़ाइए, कि आप इसमें जो है जिम्मेदारी के साथ आप इसको टेंशन को डाउन करिए, और यही हुआ इसके बाद।
श्री समीर मोहंती जी, श्री सुदर्शन नायक जी, श्री अशोक त्रिपाठी जी, श्री भुवानंद त्रिपाठी जी, this very distinguished audience, dear friends, I'm really very pleased to be in Bhubaneswar today, to be in Odisha today, and I'm very grateful to all of you. You have taken out time to come and hear me on a subject on which I have strong views and deep commitment. And before I get to the subject, I want to remind you of something which was about a year and a half ago, maybe little more than that, when we were chairing the G20. And this was the biggest international responsibility that we had taken. And we had an opportunity to use it to project India before the world. And when we in the Foreign Ministry went to the Prime Minister and told him that, sir, when you receive the leaders of the G20, that picture which will be captured by the camera, that will be the image of India before the world. And we gave him many options. And I want to remind you that he chose the Konark Chakra. So when people speak about Odisha, Asmita, when you speak about pride in Odisha, it is a pride you will all naturally have, but we also have pride in all of you. So now the topic today, why Bharat matters. We are all a few days away from making a big decision about our country. It is a decision which many of us will make, some of us with our own personal interest, some with that of a family, maybe of community, maybe of business, of organization. Some of us will make it with the viewpoint of the state. But it is very important that we make it also keep taking into account our country. So which button you press, please bear in mind that decision which we will make individually actually has a collective impact not only on the country, it has a collective impact on the world, because as I will share with you today, what is happening with us, where we are going, at what speed we are going, with how much success we are going, all these things today have an enormous implication for the world. Now, I can summarize this why Bharat matters in 2 sentences. I can say why Bharat matters because we have all changed. Why Bharat matters because today Prime Minister Modi is leading us. Full stop. But I have a larger case to make before you. And before I do that, I want to give you some examples of why and how Bharat has mattered. I refer to the G20 summit. When we took over the presidency, the chairship of the G20, to be very honest with you, this was in December of 2022. Most countries felt sorry for us, if I'm being very frank with you. Most countries felt, okay, India has taken this over, they're going to have a very difficult problem. Everybody is going to quarrel with everybody, I don't know how these people are going to manage it. And yet, in September of 2023, we were on the first day of the summit able to persuade everybody to come around to a consensus position on the most important issues of the day. So, I give you that example because when people say why Bharat matters, we are today in a very unique position. There is a tension, a very deep division between countries of the West and Russia and to some extent China also. There are big issues between the developed countries of the north and the developing countries of the south. But here is India, which has this ability of actually bridging it, of taking positions which everybody regards as fair and reasonable, and actually creating a consensus. There are not many countries today that can do this. But let me take you to a very different example. All of us in the last few years went through what I think was the most difficult experience of our lifetime. There was a reason why it was called once in a century happening. I'm talking about the COVID. There's not a single person in this room, probably not a single person in the country or the world, whose life was not impacted, was not affected by the COVID. Now, when COVID started, I'm now going back to January of 2020. People had just discovered that this pandemic is there. And there was a meeting of world leaders. It actually was a G20 meeting, it was virtual. And there was a presentation made how this COVID cannot be stopped, how it will spread through every country in the world, how millions of people could die of this pandemic. And I must tell you, the biggest concern in the room was actually what will happen to India. Because the general belief at that time in the world, among all the governments, among the UN organizations, WHO, everybody, was if there was any country which would have a problem, the biggest problem would be in India. This was January of 2020. And yet, what did we see? Yes, we had a problem. But we also saw we had a deep national ability, a resolve. We went through the lockdown. We were able to set up COVID centers. A country which did not even produce masks. I remember as a foreign minister instructing my ambassador saying, please buy masks anywhere you can find it. A country which could not produce masks within a matter of a few months was producing PPEs, was producing ventilators, was producing medicines, which was able to increase its pharmaceutical industry 4 or 5 times, and which finally ended up as one of the major vaccine suppliers of the world. So think about it. But then let us look after COVID. I still travel a lot, that's my job, I am the foreign minister. But when I go around the world, I must tell you, a lot of countries have not recovered from the COVID. That they are actually psychologically so scarred, they are economically so shattered, that their ability to come out of it and get back to normal life is not there. And in India, what we have seen is not just coming out of COVID. We have actually got back to a 7% growth rate. that in many ways, the kind of momentum which we had started before COVID, we were able to pick up on it and resume it. A country which 10 years ago was considered one of the fragile five, one of the five most likeliest economies to actually go down, today has ended up in the top five. So, this too is something we need to reflect on, because when we live in a society and all these things happen around us, we take it for granted. We think it is natural. I'm telling you, take it from me as a person who travels around the world, it is not natural. It requires a leadership, it requires policies, it requires people to rise to the challenge. It requires a certain national will and a collective determination. Now, sometimes we also are capable of feats which capture the imagination of the world. So if you ask somebody saying, okay, India, tell me something about what is it you remember, what is it which has impressed you? I can tell you in the last 1 year, probably the one achievement we have done which has impressed the world is actually the landing of Chandrayaan 3. And I happened to be at that time traveling with Prime Minister Modi. We were in South Africa for the BRICS summit. There were about 45 presidents and prime ministers, and there were a lot of guests who were there. And that evening, because in the middle of the summit, Prime Minister went out to actually see the landing, talk to the ISRO people. That evening, when he actually came, I must tell you, he got what was a standing ovation for Bharat, which was the entire room, all these 45 people. Actually, for them, it was almost like it was also their achievement. Actually, the South African president said that the entire global South feels today that India has done something for which we are collectively proud. Now, I can give you many other examples. All of us today, our life revolves around the phone. I see a lot of people holding it. Last thing before we go to sleep, first thing when we get up, right? Now, what makes that phone work? Technology. Think about it 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. Remember 2G, 3G? I'm not talking of the scandal, I'm talking of technology. Okay. So 2G, 3G, 4G. We imported it from Europe and from China. Today, we are the fastest deploying 5G country in the world, but more important, that 5G stack is an Indian 5G stack. So I think all of us need to ask ourselves, why is it that we did not do 2G, we did not do 3G, we did not do 4G, but yet we put our minds to it, somebody gave us motivation, there was a push, there was a talent there, the people had not changed. And we were actually able to come up with a 5G technology. And I can tell you with a great deal of confidence, I actually see our 5G stack going out of India to other countries as well. So, the point I'm making is when we today put our minds to it, before I come to why Bharat matters, we have the ability somewhere in us, with the right choice, with the right determination, with the right leadership, to make Bharat happen, make Bharat matter. Now, obviously when I go out and meet leaders of other governments, my basic business is foreign policy. I talk about trade, I talk about politics, I talk about security, military, technology. But in many countries, I must tell you, there is more and more interest of what is happening inside India. I actually had the president of one Arab country who used, I was very struck because he used exactly the word which we also use. He said, I have a big leakage problem in my country. Because this was a country where they also give food support, they also give various financial inclusion programs. So I want you to think about it, because many of us, maybe we are not personally beneficiaries of these programs. We are not of an income level where we require the government to give us a house or to get our rations free from the government or get our health access from the government. But just think about the scale today of what we are doing. That, because these are done, by the way, in many cases in developed countries. Some of you who would be familiar with USA would have remembered this big debate about Obamacare. How does an average American get health care? Okay. Today, at our level of income, which is very much lower than America, we are actually able to ensure that almost 400 people get care under Ayushman Bharat. That when developed countries, in America they talk about food stamp. Okay, they are talking about stamp. We are actually giving 5 kilograms ration. Central government under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana gives to 815 million people rations every month. Don't even think of it as food. Look at the nutritional and health impact of this. That when we speak today that we take away, we stop firewood in kitchens and we replace it with gas cylinder. Actually, beneficiaries of this are today 100 million people. So the scale of what we have been able to do, when I said why Bharat matters, other countries are also watching us. That many of our programs, the programs are bigger than the population of countries, sometimes population of continents. That, if think about it, in the last 10 years, under the Awas Yojana, we have built 40 million homes in the country. Okay? We have an average family size in India of 4.8. That means 190 million people in the last 10 years have got a house which they did not have earlier. 190 million people is the entire population of Japan and Germany put together. When I was talking about Garib Anna Yojana, 815 million people means feeding America and Europe together. So think of the scale really today of the transformation. And I am emphasizing this today because we, living in the middle of this change, we have in some ways absorbed it, normalized it. Sometimes we don't fully understand really what is happening even with our lives. But this is at a very basic level, I'm telling you. I would actually say, let us look ahead. That if we look today, actually at how much the business culture, the employment possibilities, the infrastructure, I've had conversations with, we had a recent visitor on January 26th, President Macron of France. He landed at Jaipur airport. I think he was even surprised there was an airport in Jaipur. People don't expect it. Now, when we got started about airports, and he wanted to know how many airports there were in the country. 10 years ago, there were 74 airports in the country. There are 149 today. Okay. Now, think of the rate of this. That means we are building 8 new airports every year. Now I can take some other part of the infrastructure. I mean, each one of us experiences it. You are experiencing it in the city, or if you travel from one city to another city. Our national highways today, we are building 28 kilometers of national highway a day. We are building 14 kilometers of railway track a day. So what used to be a month, which then became a week, in many ways is today actually happening on a daily basis. So this pace of change, the progress that a combination of infrastructure, of better education, better health, of a social system, that today the idea, this is today taken as an assumption that everybody will get electricity, everybody will get piped water, everybody will have a road to the place of habitation. Now these were actually at some point some kind of aspiration for us. I mean, we will in a few years be looking at it as history for us. And it is based on this confidence when we speak today about Vikasit Bharat. Vikasit Bharat is not a slogan. Vikasit Bharat is possible if with the right leadership, with the right preparation, with the right system, we are actually able to leapfrog. We are able to use technology and use new tools and programs and opportunities so that we don't have to go through the same route as other people did. We can move very much faster and we can end up very much ahead of many other countries. So I can tell you, when you say why Bharat matters, one of the very important reasons why Bharat matters is also that we are today seriously on the course towards a Viksit Bharat. Now, having said that, till now I have spoken about what is happening within the country, but let me also share with you what is happening in the world. And very frankly, the world is not in a good place. If you ask me, where will it be next 5 years? I think it will be as difficult, maybe even more difficult. Now, I'm normally a very optimistic person. Okay, so I'm not, saying this to tell you my job is very difficult and therefore I'm doing it well. I'm actually projecting to you what are today the trend lines that I see in the world. And you can see this. You can see this in the conflict in Ukraine. You can see this in what is happening in the Middle East, in Gaza. You can see this in the tension between, Iran and Israel and the attacks on shipping which is taking place in the Red Sea. Or what is happening in Asia, that today you have a situation like South China Sea. On our own borders with China, the challenges that we face. Or if you go away from security, I would say look at climate change. That big climate events with great disruptive possibilities are actually happening with greater frequency. Or in large parts of Africa and Latin America, as I said, they have not recovered from COVID. That in many cases, all the progress that they made in terms of health and education and infrastructure, a lot of it has actually got reversed. So the global trends are actually pretty difficult. But in all of this, there is also opportunity. And because we are one country which has the capability of using those opportunities, that is one very important reason why Bharat matters. So what is this opportunity? When COVID happened, most countries in the world realized that for many things, they were actually dependent on China. That even for the industries that they had, the raw material, the process material, the components came from China. And because COVID first affected China, everybody suddenly woke up and found that their security of supply, their dependence was actually almost total on one geography. Now this is something which is today a deep concern in the world. So if you ask me, give me one important trend in the world, it is, what we would do, all of us in our personal lives. none of us want to be dependent on one shopkeeper. Suppose that shopkeeper is ill. Suppose that street is closed down. Suppose something happens out there. It's a holiday. He's decided not to work that day. That is actually the situation the world is looking at today. So what the world is trying to do today is to create more production centers. It is trying to create more supply chains. It is trying to do what we in our business call de-risking the international economy. This is what is actually happening on the manufacturing side. Interestingly, something like this is happening on the food side. Because you will be surprised how many countries actually import food. Today we don't in large we import occasionally dal, we import edible oil, but by and large we are a self-sufficient country. But please don't think that is the case with most countries in the world. But then there is a new challenge, and this is a challenge of data. So I'm coming back to your phone again. You know, all of us, we say more things to our phone than we tell our spouses and we tell our children. If I really, ask, your phone knows more about you than you do. Think about it. Now, what happens when somebody you don't know, or maybe somebody you don't like, actually is able to access your phone? Now, they don't have to access your phone. They have other ways today in the digital domain. So, digital today privacy, digital security, how the value of data, the whole idea that we are entering a world of artificial intelligence, where if all of us have a certain habit which somebody has looked at, after that they will tell you what you are going to do, and most of the time they'll be right. They will be able to predict you. They will be able to shape you. So, we are already worried about security of supplies, of our supply chains. I include food in it, health in it. But even more, we should increasingly, and we are increasingly worrying about security of data. So, when we today have blocked many apps and games, and we have various rules and regulations, there is a very good reason why we are doing this. And the reason today is Indian data. Indian data is as much of a resource as, let us say, anything mineral that you are mining from the ground. In fact, in many ways, even more so. So, how do we today protect it, but more important, utilize it? And that is where the relevance of India comes in. Because we have one tremendous resource, that is people. That the ability, in a world which is today, many parts of the world are demographically challenged, that where there is development, there are no people or less people. Where there is technology, it is a paradox. Where there is technology, actually there is less talent. So, how do you today balance out demographics and demand? And this is where today, when we are looking at, a new education policy which my colleague Dharmendra Pradhan has spearheaded, when Prime Minister Modi talks about a culture of innovation, of skills training, of expanding technical education, the purpose of all of this is really to prepare India, prepare particularly the younger generations, to take full advantage of what are the new possibilities in the world. And this is beginning to happen. We just, one of our last few cabinet meetings before we decided to go for elections was we approved a set of semiconductor agreements. And there are going to be today a very series of major investments in India, some of it with our own technology, some of it in collaboration with others. So we see this whole semiconductor chips world. When you look, today's era, the era which awaits us, it is actually an era. I mean, we have to do all the other things. We have to do the manufacturing, we have to do the food, we have to do the health, we have to do the roads, but we now have to do the chips. We have to do the electric cars, we have to do the drones, we have to do the space, we have to do the solar, we have to do the renewables. And we have to do all this while doing that also. And that is why, when I said the choice we are making, you will not only be deciding who will be guiding the fortunes of your own state or of our country. You will also be deciding who you are going to put in charge, who will take those wise decisions, the far-seeing judgments, which will prepare India to be a bigger factor in the world. Now it's interesting when you look at it in terms of how our talent is perceived. The first 30, 40 years, I would say, of my working life, most countries used to complain to me about Indians coming there. The last 10 years, every country is now approaching me and saying, let's find a way by which Indians can come there. No, it's actually very interesting that if I look even in the last 2 years, we have, these are called mobility agreements. Because see, we also don't want Indians to go out without the protection, without their rights, without, what is their entitlement. So we tell many countries that if people are coming there, you please sign an agreement with us where you promise that you will give them the same kind of protections and the same kind of entitlements. And we are seeing, and this is, here I am talking from, I would say, blue collar all the way to the highest talent. Countries like Germany, Austria, Italy, Japan, Australia are today very, very keen. They have all signed agreements. Now, in some areas, it's a little more challenging. I mean, there are people who go out to the Gulf, that is more a blue collar area. If you go to Europe, it is much more a high skill area. You go to America, it's much more of a high skill area. But this global workplace which has come, this is actually going to change our lives, because it will also impact us at home. If already, I must tell you, about 18 million Indians live and work abroad, and there are 17 million people of Indian origin who are nationals of other countries. So think about it, 3.5 crore people, 35 million people already today are living and working abroad. Now, as these numbers grow, because they may not live abroad. I mean, I am saying professions like, say, even aviation, hotel, hospitality, merchant shipping. You would have just seen in the newspapers that, today there's a spike. Germany is actively recruiting technical students from India. Now we're going to see all these changes. Even, it may not be us, it may not be our children or our grandchildren, but in some form all of this is going to connect us more and more with the world. And that is why today we also need someone who can think globally, but who can put in place a system. Because as I said, we can offer them entitlements, but if they get into trouble, you need a leader and you need a government who will do what we did in Ukraine. That if Indians are going to travel abroad in larger numbers, they must travel with the confidence that they not only have a passport, but they have a government which will stand by them whatever happens. So sometimes I joke with the Prime Minister saying, you have offered Modi ki guarantee for this election, but we have been doing Modi ki guarantee abroad. And Ukraine was an example. That Prime Minister, our strategic relevance is growing, our connectivity relevance is growing on a whole lot of global issues today. Where we stand, what we do. As I said during COVID, the fact that we could become a big vaccine producer made a very big impact. But most of all, I would say, because I want to end here now and perhaps listen to or respond to some of what you may have to say. I think there is something we are doing in the next few days which also is a very important reason why Bharat matters. For many years, there is a belief in the world that you need like an authoritarian government to bring about change, that only those models really work. We have to show that democracies can deliver. And today, what we are doing by making wise choices in a democracy, by electing people who have the vision of progress, who have the courage to actually change the country, who have the integrity today to resist the temptations which are. We are not just another country. We are a country we are a society with 5,000 years of history. When we once again rise to the top, which is where we were once upon a time, this will profoundly change the world, and we should see that as a responsibility. So often the choices which we make look very routine. They look like something which comes every 5 years. But please reflect on it. Please tell others that what we are doing actually has a much larger implication. In many ways, when 1 billion people vote, their vote actually changes the world. And that is why Bharat matters. So once again, thank you. It's a great pleasure to come.
ଅଳ୍ପ କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ୍ ନିଆଯିବ ପ୍ଲିଜ୍ ଜଣେ ମାଇକ୍ରୋଫୋନ୍. Yes, please.
Jaishankar ji, I address the minister in you with this question. A small suggestion, should you call your ministry Ministry of External Affairs, or now should change it and call it the Ministry of Global Affairs? My suggestion is, you call it Ministry of Global Affairs, and that would be in tune with your subject and your commitment. That is the first. The second, which is bothering me, a question is, unless you have intellectual leadership of the world, you would not be in a position to dominate the world. The leadership responsibility today with the Euro-American countries, and you have to virtually take it away from them and establish global leadership. How do you do it? Thank you.
I go question by question. I think it's still called Ministry of External Affairs. I take very careful note of your suggestion. So if anything ever changes, we can all remember this conversation. In terms of, leadership, I absolutely agree with you. I think, sometimes when we talk about change, for obvious reasons, we will say economically. Like I would say, we are 5th largest economy, we are bigger. I will even say, sometimes we are politically more influential. But what is, I think, very important, and sometimes we don't give it enough weight, is the cultural change. Whose narrative, whose values, who defines what is what. So I think that is still today a contestation that is taking place. It's very important for us. So we have, for example, people who prepare rankings. Now, at some stage, we have to also rank other people. That time should not be very far away. So I do think the intellectual part is a very valid point. I think in many ways we are actually preparing for that era.
First of all, on behalf of the state of Orissa and its people, we give you huge compliments to you and Honorable Prime Minister for extending critical help to the Odia people, those who are stranded in Sudan, Lebanon, and also Ukraine. In fact, a huge compliment also because you have elevated Oriya Asmita by the symbol of Konark wheel. I have only just one small thing to tell on behalf of the youth of Orissa. As you know, the youth of Orissa, they are very talented, highly skilled, and not only in the country, in the state, they also have a lot of presence outside, abroad. They have an aspiration that they should get best of the study in the foreign universities, they should get scholarship, and they should be exposed to the best of the technology. Can you just tell us that what kind of assistance they can look for from the External Affairs Ministry to prepare their application blank? As you know that for getting admission in the top universities, you require to make the application blank in a proper way. Now, right now, these agencies are doing. Can there be some kind of help to them?
You know, I'm very, very familiar with the talent of Orissa because when I studied in the university, all the people who got better marks than me were all from Orissa. So I know that. But what I think we need to do today is actually to expand our own educational capabilities. And that's what we are planning to do under the new economic policy. And expand our educational capabilities means we should today have the confidence of setting the terms for foreign universities to work with us collaboratively, and also where our own universities or colleges want to go out in the world, encourage them, facilitate them. And so I don't think the solution is, definitely the interests of students matter, because again, one of the changes which has happened in the last 10 years is every embassy today has instructions saying, please regularly, continuously stay in touch with students. Make sure somebody from the embassy goes to concentrations, gatherings where there are Indian students, because as our students increase, it's our obligation to take care of them. Young people sometimes make mistakes, they need advice. But I don't see the solution as just focusing on individual people's prospects. I see it nationally and sectorally, that we must have more universities. Our universities should be better quality. There should be more, diversity, and I would say the spectrum of education should increase. And I can tell you with a fair deal of confidence that in the Modi third term, how to improve or enhance, deepen education and skills training will actually be a very, very important priority.
Jaishankar sir, I would like to thank you for rescuing 16 Indians and one girl cadet from MSCRS. Many thanks to you. And my question is a very common question, the question of 150 crore Indians. Can we ever get back POK and Askai Chin? If yes, how? How is it possible? Apart from the things we used to hear from Congress government, bilateral talks, all those things, is there any other way or anything you think? What is your point of view on that?
Sometimes mistakes which previous leaders or governments make can have very far-reaching consequences. Okay, these are examples of what you say. That even after what happened in Aksai Chin, even then it took a Modi to actually make border infrastructure into a priority. Because in Aksai Chin, we didn't even know they were building a road. That was the extent of our limitations. And in the case of POK, the going to the UN, that itself was a big mistake. And then actually, to agreeing to whatever was agreed to at that point of time in a ceasefire agreement. So sometimes these are very complicated, very difficult inheritance, legacies of history that you get. There is no easy answer to it. But this much I can tell you. I'm 10 years ago, in this country, nobody was talking about POK. Okay? I mean, think back. Okay? The fact that you're asking me the question itself is a beginning. And everything starts with a beginning.
Thank you very much, sir, for an excellent, I'll say that enlightened kind of thing that you have thought about, and empathetically you have expressed yourself how why Bharat matters. My question is, like, when we are thinking of casting the vote, unless there will be large-scale changes in electioning process, election commission, like what is happening here is, not many people are coming as the independent candidate. The small parties, they don't have any relevance, national relevance. And even if you see, there are certain regional parties, they are only limited to that state, but they are participating in Lok Sabha elections. So how they are going to guide the country? So unless we have a large-scale changes in the election procedures and election commission, so maybe with 2 or 3 parties, like in other developed countries how it is happening, maybe it will be difficult to have a right choice.
I'll take 2 or 3 questions.
Please, no political questions. Rather, the subject should be why Bharat matters. That is better. Okay, sir.
No, maybe I'll take 1 or 2 more and then take it as a group so that more people get a chance.
This Khalistani movement, which started during Indira Gandhi's time when Operation Blue Star happened, now it is spreading from Canada, America and other countries. Why America also, one side they are supporting India, other side they are not supporting and rather opposing. So in this context, what do you think that how we are going to suppress the terrorist organization, those who are against India? Okay. First question. Second question is that...
One question.
One question.
Oh, one more person can. Yeah.
No.
Please reassure us. We have seen you in social media and it's a dream come true. But taking a cue from that Khalistan, we would feel that like your speech was intellectually soothing and reassuring. We also want an answer from you because we go by what we see in the media. For instance, yesterday, 2 Indians have been arrested in Canada, and we would like to hear from you. Thank you.
This is last question, please.
My question is, I think in the month of March during this year, Prime Minister had told that the freebies supplied to people do have adverse impact on the economy of the country. But now, as you told, 85 crores of people are given 5 kg rice and certain things actually. What is your comment on this? Because Prime Minister says, and I agree to that actually, it is having adverse impact on the economy of the country. How can you let us make the people independent? They must be empowered to live on their own. So, what's your comment on that?
Yeah, okay. I will take this round, and then if we have time, we can take one more round. Okay. My first comment on, regional, the political party regional. Again, I am making this as a broad point. We are a very diverse country. It is natural that the diversity will also express itself in politics. But because we are diverse, it is very important that we always nurture that sense of nationhood. It is not something we always take for granted, because there will be other forces who will always try to exploit it. I'm not talking, as a general proposition. When it comes to governance, it's important, I think, when people make choices to see really how effective, if there's a regional party, what is the quality of delivery of that party? Is it better for the state that that party is in sync with the center or not? Are they actually pursuing national priorities? Is the competence and the delivery of that party good enough? I think these are very legitimate questions. So a regional party should not get support only because it is regional. I think everybody who is regional is also national. They have equal right and equal responsibility also to think nationally. On the two Khalistan related questions, see, what has happened is, to be honest with you, in some countries, these kinds of people have organized themselves politically and become a political lobby. Okay? And in some of these democratic countries, the politicians of those countries are made to believe that if they defer to these people or pander to these people have some ability to get a community to support them. So they have tried to create space for themselves in the politics of these countries. I mean, at this time, I would say, it's not so much a problem in the US. Our biggest problem right now is in Canada. Because in Canada, actually, today the party in power in Canada, other parties in Canada have given these kinds of extremism, separatism, advocates of violence a certain legitimacy in the name of free speech. See, when you tell them something, their answer is, no, we are a democracy, but it is free speech. But the point that they need to understand, this kind of, it's no longer a world which runs as a one-way street. That if there are things which happen out there, there will be pushback. The Newton's law of politics will apply there also. That there will be a reaction. Others will, take steps or counter it. And often, I mean, when I see, for example, these kinds of attacks or threats to our embassies, because they concern me very deeply. And I tell the foreign minister, saying, suppose it happened to you. If it was your diplomat, your embassy, your flag, how would you react? So we have to keep our position strong. On this particular report which has come, I also saw it yesterday night. I was coming to Odisha in the morning. Okay, I mean, somebody may have been arrested, their police may have done some investigation. But the fact is, number of gangland people, number of people with organized crime links from Punjab have been made welcome in Canada. We have been telling Canada, saying, look, these are wanted criminals from India. You have given them visas. They have come, many of them, in false documentation. And yet you allow them to live there. If you decide to import for political purposes people with very dubious, actually very negative background, there will be issues. They have, in some cases, created problems in their own country as a result of their own policies. No, why would we fear? I mean, if something happened there, it is for them to worry about. And the freebie question, I make a very important distinction, and I think that distinction is very much in Prime Minister's mind, to the best of my understanding. You see, if people do not get food, this is not a freebie. People should not be dying of hunger in our country and we say, well, they didn't have the money to buy food or they didn't get access. It's a moral obligation on our part. There is a difference to my mind between providing food, electricity for household consumption, roads, these kinds of services. But when people promise what is beyond a basic requirement, when you are doing it with no sense of entitled categories, and you are doing it without any consideration of a budget, that you don't have the ability to support it, and it doesn't have an economically or a health-wise or, there's no other socio-economic benefit which comes from it, then yes, it qualifies as a freebie. So I would urge you to make that distinction.
I am very delighted to listen to your talk very nicely. I want to ask you to know your reaction. This kind of euphoria which has been created during the last 10 years, it may peter out because it is being corroborated by Global Peace Index, Global Happiness Index, Per Capita Income Index. Everywhere India stands 133 beyond. Global Happiness Index, Global Per Capita Index, Global Peace Index, Global Where to Born Index, Human Development Index, and among the Committee of Nations, India does not appear in the world map, in the educational map. Top 200 universities, India does not appear till now. What is your reaction? Bharat matters.
I'll give you an answer, don't worry.
Sir, this question I was waiting eagerly to ask you. India has been tracking you and making a note of you since the day you became Foreign Secretary. But we have an observation, sir, people of India observe that S. Jaishankar as a Foreign Secretary was much more effective than S. Jaishankar as a Foreign Minister. Because India is run by bureaucrats, diplomats and businessmen. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Jaishankar, Odisha has a very natural connection with Southeast Asia. We are historically connected. So, do you feel, yes, sir. I'm here. Do you feel this historical connection has been leveraged enough yet to project India's soft power in the ASEAN countries?
One more question.
So it took India just 70 years to this kind of foreign policy what we are doing. Congratulations for that. And my question is how we are far from the permanent memberships of United Nations and what is the strategy in place, please?
Okay. I think last question we'll ask this young lady since. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. My name is Madhusmita Balyar Singh. My question to you is, given the significant transformation India have witnessed in the past 10 years, from being a fragile 5 economy to the top 5 economy globally.
Question.
Yeah. So what are the 5 could you please highlight the key 5 contributors that have propelled the remarkable economic growth of India? Thank you.
No. Okay. So, I would not characterize the last 10 years as euphoria. I would characterize it as an optimism based on the fact that people's lives are actually getting better. And I think it's something we all need to ask ourselves, because after all, if people's lives were not getting better, ultimately, why would they go express support or why would they go in a direction? Now, you spoke about indexes. Now, some of these indexes I take seriously because let us say if you have human development indices, it's a serious exercise, maybe it can improve. But some indexes I think are very questionable. I mean, you said about World Happiness Index. I please ask you to look at the countries which are on top of that happiness index. Please spend 6 months there. I guarantee you'll come back very depressed. I don't want to take the names of the countries, but you know which climatic zone they are. And if you look at their social habits, I want to see, people like to look at their longevity, their suicide rates. I mean, there is a lot which is very, very debatable in many of this. The gentleman who asked me, I am tempted to say that I can understand why in Orissa somebody would think a bureaucrat is better than a politician. But I assure you that is not the case. That in a democracy, In a democracy, politicians should lead. People elect political leaders. People do not elect bureaucrats. Let's be very clear on this point. On Southeast Asia, absolutely, I agree with you. I think we are looking at various ways by which we can intensify our relationship. And I think Odisha as a state which looks at Bay of Bengal, we actually plan definitely to increase the levels of our commitment to BIMSTEC, which is a Bay of Bengal periphery. And we think in new opportunities like coastal shipping and Bay of Bengal activities, the state of Odisha would actually benefit from some of the things which we are planning to do. On the Security Council, I think the global mood is with us. More and more countries today feel there should be reform, feel India should be out there. But it's a complicated thing because there are countries which are blocking us as well. And finally, if you ask me, what are the 5 things which have really changed us in a way? I mean, obviously, one is economic performance. 2, I would say, in many ways, is actually the quality of governance that I spoke about. The third is the fact that we are today, if you look at the changes in India, we are actually becoming a less elitist society. We are gathering, we are more inclusive. Our development is capturing much more of that country. Fourth, I would say the spirit in people. You described it as euphoria. I would actually say a certain self-confidence. I find, if I really want to improve my mood today, I go to a university. Because I find young people in universities are so self-confident, so much more assured about what their future holds. And finally, the 5th factor is called Modi.
थैंक यू सर जो मानकर क्वेश्चन नहीं पानी मु क्षमा मागुची कारण समय आमे ठीक समय आरंभ करथिलु ठीक समय सारुचु आ सेति पई हमको क्षमा देबे जो भाई भौणी माने छिड़ा है कि रहिचंती माने एते समय धरकी तांकर ठार भी क्षमा मागुची आ समस्त को धन्यवाद दवा पई मु हमर भुवनानंद त्रिपाठी को अनुरोध करूची धन्यवाद देबे
सर्वप्रथमे आपण मन समस्त तरफ